Okay, so before starting, just wanted to acknowledge the copyright administrator, the chair and chief executive of Copy Ghana, fellow colleagues at Copy Ghana, Waipo, Ifro, and all fellow speakers, as well as the participants, both online and on site in Ghana. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me on this workshop to speak about collective management of rights in the publishing sector, related to what we often refer to as text and image-based works, including the management of rights in visual arts. And let me see whether we can make this one move. And also move that one away. Okay. So there it goes. So collective management organizations that are well governed benefit all stakeholders. They contribute to implementing legislation and they enhance legal use of copyright works to the benefit of rights holders as well as to users, and also to society at large. Collective management of copyright and neighboring rights concerns a group or groups of rights holders. Collective management organizations managing rights collectively are normally independent, non-profit organizations governed primarily by copyright holders themselves. Collective management of rights is the preferred option when it is the rights holder's choice, which is often the case, or when individual management is impossible, impracticable, or insufficient. Typical examples are collecting and distributing remuneration for copies made for strictly private purposes, or for visual artists' resale rights, and the authorization of multiple copying of extracts of published works in education, private corporations, or public and private administration, when multiple works of multiple authors and publishers, both national and foreign, are involved. A collective management organization authorization then complements rather than replaces licenses offered by rights holders themselves. CMOs may be managing rights in a specific sector, for example, the publishing sector, such as Copy Ghana, in respect of specific works, for instance, visual arts, DAX in the UK has been mentioned, or they may be multi-purpose organizations managing rights in several categories of copyright works, like music, visual arts, text and image-based work, audiovisual works, etc. The main collective management organization activities comprise negotiating licensing agreements and collecting and distributing remuneration. And I noticed a question regarding the distribution of revenues. It's generally based on collecting information from users on what they're actually copying or using. And CMOs are also very often involved in and even leading anti-piracy activities. CMOs operate on the basis of the law and mandates granted to them by rights holders, which may be accompanied by a CMO membership. Like was mentioned by Dr. Adusei, the legal basis for any management of copyright is the exclusive rights granted to authors and other rights holders to reproduce, distribute, or make available, including communicate the work to the public, or to authorize others to act in such activities. Management of rights also requires that exceptions and limitations to those rights are considered. But in addition, exceptions and limitations to exclusive rights may in itself impose collective management of certain rights. This is the case when the law permits certain copies to be made against an obligation to remunerate rights holders. This is the case in very many countries surrounding Ghana, in the French-speaking part of Africa, which would then make it payable via collective management organizations. Remuneration for private copying is another easy, recognizable example of the law imposing collective management of rights, which is applied also in Ghana. To be attractive to rights holders and for them to sign up as members and grant a mandate to the CMO, It must be seen as a well-governed and accountable organization, and this requires in turn a high degree of transparency in the work and work process of the CMO. Finally, it's important to realize that CMOs work within an ecosystem consisting of a primary market, typically this buying and selling of the book in a bookstore or subscribing to an ebook service, a secondary market, typically a photocopy or a digital copy of an already legally published work, and exceptions and limitations to the author's exclusive rights, typically authorization by law to make a copy for private purposes or quote from the book. CMOs in general and primarily manage rights in the secondary market and in relation to exceptions and limitations to exclusive rights. As has been mentioned, CMOs in the publishing or text and image-based work sector are referred to as reproduction rights organizations, or RROs. RROs are generally set up and governed jointly by authors and publishers and their organizations. Any writer, whether of scientific, academic, textbook, or fiction literature, translators, journalists, any visual artist, be it a photographer, an illustrator, another artist, as well as composers of music and publishers of any type of books, periodicals, journal, newspaper, magazine, or music in print, should become a member of a RRO and collaborate with the RRO. There are RROs or multi-purpose CMOs managing already to start managing rights in text and image-based works in nearly 100 countries worldwide, including in 23 African countries. Most of them are members of IFRA, the prime global network of rights holder organizations in the publishing sector. How then do RROs manage rights collectively in the digital area? Well, the first RROs were formed to respond to requests from educational institutions to make legally copies of extracts from published works. Their activities are still often supported by legislation. For instance, by stipulating that a licensing agreement overrides an exception or limitation to the author's exclusive rights. This is, for example, the case in nearby country Nigeria. Reprographic copies may not be made under the exception in the law if a RRO offers a collective licensing agreement for the same reproduction or for the same type of use. This also applies in Ghana, which has adopted similar legislation, and in a large number of other countries in Africa, in Asia, in the Caribbean, and also in Europe, such as in Ireland and in the UK. Although education remains the main beneficiary of RRO services, all other sectors of society where copies of published works are made are licensed by RROs. That means libraries, public administration, corporations, private industries, etc. Having initially been set up when photocopying was the predominant technology in the 1970s and the early 1980s, RROs started by managing the right to make photocopies of pages and chapters of published works. Subsequently, with technological development, faxing and certain points of printing, and the inclusion of excerpts of works in overhead projector foils. I don't know whether any of you will remember overhead projectors. These activities were added to the photocopy license. And this triggered again the need for a common denominator, which became reprographic reproduction or reprography. With the digital environment, RROs started to include in their licensing agreements the right to scan from legally published works, at first as an optional addendum to the traditional reprography agreement. Currently, digital reproduction and uses authorized by RROs comprise downloads and printouts from internet and databases, storing on the institution's database for distribution and making available excerpts of works on password-protected internal networks to students, to employees, etc., as well as the inclusion of works in virtual learning environment platforms and projecting works on interactive smart boards, or whatever you call them. The Higher Education Licensing Agreement signed by the Irish Copyright Licensing Agency, ICLA, in Ireland can exemplify what an RRO licensing agreement in this market segment, higher education, can typically allow. So the licensing agreement allows the user to make a digital or a print copy from a digital or from a print book, or periodicals and newspapers. Can copy text and still images, also from websites and other sources. Copy up to 10% of one chapter, or one article, one short story, or a poem from an anthology, whichever is greater, per course, per study. The equivalent amount from a digital online publication organized in a non-traditional manner. And there are also those who allow them per bytes. This licensing agreement further allows the distribution of digital copies to all students on a specific course or study by mail or via a secure virtual learning environment. No matter where the student is, whether the student is based in Dublin in Ireland, in London in UK, in Oslo, Norway, in Accra, Ghana. And the student may store copies to view at a future time. They may store copies for the current academic year and use copies with digital whiteboards and presentation software programs. So this is an example of what could be included in a licensing agreement for higher educational institutions. It's equally important to note that in addition to an activity that requires licensing, digital technologies also facilitate management of copyright and the exchange of data between RROs and other CMOs. As an example, in Singapore, the national RRO class has developed My Class Records. It allows educators to submit records of copied works via an application downloaded to the educator's smartphone, tablet, or other portable digital device. The educator can then scan the barcode on the publication, or he or she can enter the ISBN number into the device, together with the pages from page 10 to page 16, for instance, and the number of copies made. And this data will then be transferred electronically to class to be automatically seized by software and ingested into the class database. And this facilitates invoicing as well as revenue distribution to rights holders. Other RROs offer full text databases. In the UK, the Copyright Licensing Agency, CLA, has worked with authors, publishers, and higher education institutions to develop a web-based platform called the Digital Content Store. It combines a repository of digitized books and journal extracts and born digital material with an online workflow management tool integrated with major library management systems and reading lists. User reporting is automatic, of course, and instant when authorized users extracts the selected excerpts. In Norway, Copynor, the Norwegian RO, offers Bulk, a digital service that permits lecturers to access a content database to put together course packs, which they make available to students as digital files via a digital content delivery system. What is important to note is that managing rights digitally requires the use of appropriate technical standards and identifiers, which of course in the publishing sector includes the ISBN, the ISSN, but also the International Standard Name Identifier, the ISNI, which I highly commend. And also many may take advantage of the ONIX standards used by the book sector, which also comprise ONIX for RROs. The use of standards and identifiers is also indispensable in respect of text and data mining, TDM. So what is TDM? There are several ways of expressing the definition of text and data mining. The one used in the WIPO pilot project on TDM that was referred to by Ms. Sarah Tran defines this as an application of computational processes to materials to derive data and text from or about documents, research materials, and various works. The EU Digital Single Market Directive also specifies purposes of the mining in its definition when it says that it automated analytical technique aimed at analyzing text and data in digital form in order to, and here comes the purpose, generate information which includes but is not limited to patterns, trends, and correlations. In short, the TDM process requires that text and images be reproduced, for instance, by copying or scanning, and stored. These are actions covered by the exclusive rights of rights holders. Authorizing is thus required. The laws of some countries, which has been mentioned already, provide an exception or limitation to the exclusive rights of reproduction for TDM for defined purposes in many countries. It is generally narrowly defined. There has therefore been requests for easy ways to authorize the use of text, etc., for legitimate text and data mining purposes. And some RROs have started to license TDM. In the US, it is done by CCC through RightFind, which is a mechanism that they have developed. Licensed users can access a full text journal article database in XML format for text mining. In the UK, CLA has cooperated with its member organizations to develop a TDM license. It allows licensed users to copy, store, process copies, and carry out computational analysis of extracts or licensed published works. The TDM license does, however, not permit that it be used for training purposes or other uses in relation to generative AI platform, artificial intelligence platforms, or large language models. CLA is working with its member associations to develop an AI license. Collective licensing, or TDM, is expected to become increasingly requested by users, in particular by higher education and research institutions and certain commercial companies. Should we then conclude that RROs should stop focusing on traditional reprographic reproduction to concentrate the efforts on digital uses only? Hardly. Several studies have shown that hard copies will still be needed in a foreseeable future. A study carried out by the US linguist Naomi Barron documents that students across continents prefer to have access to both digital and paper-based resources. It's the Winnie the Pooh approach. Yes to both. Digital version to search, paper-based to study. If forced to choose between the two, 92% of the students opted for the hard copy. And that was across continents, from the United States via Europe, Asia, etc. Several studies, and this is why it is like this. Because several studies, including those of Lauren Singer and Patricia Alexander at the University of Maryland, have shown that students score better on comprehension when using hard copies for their studies. 85 countries worldwide participate yearly in the OECD-led Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, whereby 15-year-old students are tested in key subject matters. With digital learning, resources have prevailed over time. Scores have often declined, indicating decreasing skills and knowledge. And this has led inter alia, the current Swedish Minister of Education, to bring back books, hard copies, and handwriting in primary and secondary education in Sweden. Concluding, and that's a quote from her in a newspaper, digitization in schools was a failure. In Norway, the Ministry of Education has allocated an equivalent of some 30 million US dollars towards schools to buy books in hard copies, and has announced that she is considering following Sweden. Therefore, photocopying is here to stay for a long time. So a RRO should then license both reprography and other paper-based reproduction and certain digital uses, as well as certain digital uses based on the mandate that they get from the rights holders. Another right managed collectively in the publishing sector, worth mentioning, with steadily increased importance, is PLR, or the public lending right. PLR, in short, is the right that authors and often also publishers and other rights holders have to receive remuneration for the lending and free use of their works by libraries accessible to the public. PLR is recognized in the laws of 61 countries, several of them in Africa, and there are systems in place today in 35 countries. Public libraries are included in all systems. In some systems, also educational and/or scientific and national libraries are included. Printed books are included in all PLR systems. Many also include visual arts works, talking books and CDs, and a few also ebooks. Most of the PLR systems are administered by or with the involvement of RROs or other CMOs. Most of those CMOs are IFRA members. In a few countries, the PLR administrator is a public body. In a few countries, and mainly Nordic countries, payments are made directly to authors' organizations. PLR is also relevant to visual artists. This is also a sector where collective management has undergone changes with increased use of digital technology. Visual material of artworks can take many forms. And examples here are fine art, like painting, drawing, sculptures, etc. Photography, whether fine arts photography, reporting, newspaper photos, documentary, etc. Illustrations of all kinds, craft and applied art, such as jewelry, design, whether graphic design or other designs, product design, architecture, and prints, such as engravings. As stated in the WIPO e-learning course material, collective management of rights in visual arts may comprise what is referred to as primary and secondary rights, although management of secondary rights is more common. By primary rights, one thinks of reproduction rights, which may be the inclusion of a picture in a book or on a poster or on a postcard. Broadcasting rights, for instance, in an audiovisual production or a TV program. Rental rights, this is typically in some countries that there are especially private companies which do not prefer to buy art, but to rent art so they can change over time. Communication to the public, which is the case when artworks are included on web pages, newspapers, etc. And merchandising rights, such as for T-shirts, umbrellas, cups, and what have you. To manage some or all of such rights, especially certain painters have preferred to transfer them to CMO and ask them to manage these primary rights. Or the secondary rights of visual arts. We have the retransmission of broadcasts by cable or wireless, private copying, reprography, and public lending, which we have already touched upon. An important source of income to visual artists is the artist resale rights, or droit de suite, and the payment for that. It is based on the Berne Convention, administered by WIPO, and Article 14 ter of that convention, and is currently recognized in more than 80 countries worldwide, including in 11 African countries. The rationale behind the artist resale rights, or droit de suite, is that a visual artist often becomes famous and the work the works increase in value only at a very late stage of the career, or even after their death. They should therefore be entitled to a share from the resale of their works while they are still alive, and so should their heirs after the death of the artist. And then they would follow the terms of 70 years or 50 years, or whatever you have in your countries. In short, artist resale rights works like this, that a fee is calculated as a percentage of the sales price of the work, with a maximum rate and also a minimum where it hits in for the calculation of the fee. The fee is calculated either based on the actual sales price, typically 5% of the sales price, or on the basis of the increased value between the two sales, in which case the percentage would be higher than when it is calculated on the sales price itself. And the resale rights applies to all types of original visual arts works. The seller, for instance, the auction house or a gallery, is normally liable for the payment of the resale rights fee. This is, however, not always the case, even if it's in a large majority of the case. Management of the artist's resale rights is by collective management organizations. It's difficult to imagine that it could be managed otherwise. Some visual arts CMOs have established image databases from which they license certain uses. The French visual arts CMO, ADAGP, or in English, ADAGP, offers the opportunity to access an image bank online on its website with the works they have been mandated to store. From that bank, the user can order and reproduce images and obtain a license for the use. The stored images are marked to enable use control and prevent unauthorized copying. In the UK, DAX, the Visual Arts CMO, DAX, proposes Art Image, which is a similar service. Online Art, and I believe that Ms. Saratran is on the board of Online Art, is a joint initiative by several CMOs managing rights in visual arts, which started in Europe some 10 years ago. It is nowadays a part of the services of CIAPG, the International Council of Creators and Graphic, Plastic and Photographic Arts. CIAPG has visual CMO members from all continents, including 8 in Africa. Its current president is the Algerian sculptor Kader Attila, currently working out of Paris and Berlin. Online Art is a one-stop shop, offering from a common server worldwide licenses, including cross-border licenses on works of some 40,000 artists for online uses. It enables users, commercial as well as non-commercial, to get permission through a joint service to use images, for example, on their websites. Efficient management also of visual arts works digitally requires the use of standards and identifiers. The most used ones are digital signatures, used, for example, to verify the authenticity of the work and its creator. Digital watermarks, which are invisible marks or hidden messages in an authorized copy of the work. Fingerprints, that is invisible marks which identify both the work, its creator, and the licensed user. An international standard name of identify the ISNI. With a view to enhancing management of visual arts in the digital environment, the US and French visual arts CMOs, the Artist Rights Society in the US and the ADAGP in France, are currently cooperating in a project aimed at automatic recognition of images using digital fingerprint technologies. By using appropriate software, the CMO or other authorized representative and the creator can trace the use of the work that has a digital signature, watermark, or fingerprints, wherever it is used in the world. Detecting a work without that information means that the copy is most likely not an authorized copy. So to conclude and sum up, collective management benefit all stakeholders, rights holders who can do and what they should be doing, namely create, produce, and publish, users who can rely on easy legal access to copyright works and then rely on being copyright compliant, legislators being accompanied in implementing its legislation, and society can benefit from contribution to the economy, to employment, and most importantly to culture, because monies circulated back to authors and publishers results in the creation of new quality work created in a context with which one national is familiar, which is truly important. So to summarize, collective management of rights is an important corporate economic ecosystem factor. RROs focus on managing rights in the secondary market and in relation to limitations and exceptions to exclusive rights. Collective management in rights in visual arts may also comprise certain primary rights. Most of the nearly all RROs or CMOs managing rights in the publishing sector are members of IFRA, the global network in the publishing sector. And collective management of rights need to focus on both traditional hard copies and digital copies and uses in the near future and the foreseeable future. I thank you for your very kind attention and listening to me.